This is Hollywood, the most powerful film industry on the planet. It earns more than all other industries combined and provides the entire globe with its products. This colossus produces about 700 films annually. That is, 2 films a day. And to maintain this pace, about 700,000 people work for it. And this is Nigeria, a country where half the population lives below the poverty line. A place where there is practically no education, medicine, and even the internet is available to only a third of the population. A country where until recently, there were only 3 cinemas in Lagos, a city of 20 million. Today, this country produces 3 times more films than Hollywood and completely covers the African continent with its own content. This is the story of how the 3rd largest industry in the world literally came out of nowhere, about how it provided 1.5 billion people with its films, how it completely beat Hollywood in Africa, and how it grows exponentially every day. You probably haven't heard the story about how in 1992, an adventurous Nigerian electronics seller ordered a large batch of blank video cassettes from Taiwan to sell on the local market. But people were in no hurry to buy them because video cameras were a novelty then, and there was nothing to re-record from the TV, and few people even had them. So the unfortunate seller hired a theater director to shoot a cheap film on a home camera and copy it onto cassette tapes, thereby increasing their marketability. A month later, the director brought the finished film called Living in Bondage, the story of a farmer in a big city who loses his wife and is haunted by her ghost. The film sold millions of copies and marked the beginning of a new wave of Nigerian cinema. Literally, everyone who could reach a video camera wanted to make their own movie, and literally every film made gained incredible popularity. And the reason for this is quite sad. Poverty. Firstly, Nigeria is a country with a very rapidly growing population and a large number of young people, and secondly, the country that has the largest reserves of oil and gas on the continent. But as usual, the profits from it are shared between oil companies, the local government, and those who protect these two. The problem is that there is so much oil in Nigeria that if you want, you can extract it yourself, which is of course illegal but tempting. This became an aid to the formation of gangster groups, which sometimes organized simply to feed themselves and their families. So it turns out that young people have nowhere to go. It's either farming, which your great-grandmothers used to do, or stealing oil and robbing people. For most Nigerians, movies on cassette tapes have become the only available entertainment that, at least for a short time, allows them to distance themselves from the injustice happening around. Coincidentally, at the same time, in the rest of the world, digital technologies began to quickly replace audio and video recordings. The result was huge stocks of discarded videotapes around the world, which Nigerians began to actively import to their homeland for almost nothing. The booming sales of Living in Bondage revealed a way to capitalize on the large supply of unused tapes by using them as an inexpensive way to distribute direct-to-video releases of films. This business model became the primary way to finance and create even more films.
The film could be shot in just a few days, and the director could be, roughly speaking, anyone. Often the script was written right on the set, and all the scenes were filmed in one day. The actors were required to wear their own clothes and apply their own makeup.
Recalls one of the directors. Thanks to the fact that every second person could make a movie and it cost them practically nothing, the industry began to grow by leaps and bounds. In the early 2000s, this local phenomenon received its current name, Nollywood, by analogy with its 2 older brothers, Hollywood in America and Bollywood in India. Already by 2005, an average of 20 films were released per week in Nigeria, and by the mid-10s, their number exceeded 50. Nollywood, for the first time, gave Africans the opportunity to watch films made by other Africans on a huge scale. The films did much to eliminate mutual suspicion and mistrust between them, and promoted intra-African tourism and trade, as the films shed light on common traditions, habits, and culture across the continent. As a result, they attracted a massive African audience, some of whom had never seen a single movie before this film boom. Today, Nollywood contributes several percent of the Nigerian economy's GDP and is almost single-handedly responsible for the entertainment and leisure sector across the continent. Due to the fact that most Africans simply cannot afford to go on vacation or to an amusement park or shopping center, their only recreational activity is watching movies. Moreover, most often movies are watched on DVD or even cassettes because television and the internet are accessible far from everywhere. And to choose a movie for the evening, Nigerians do not scroll through selections of online cinemas, but go to a special film bazaar where dozens of sellers of unique and sometimes their own content in paints retell the plots of films. The government does not support Nollywood in any way. It exists on its own. In Africa, it is difficult to avoid watching Nigerian films. They are shown on buses, restaurants, and hotels. According to official data alone, the industry employs more than 1 million people, which is already more than in the US. And it should be noted that those who distribute these films are not taken into account, and that most Nollywood workmen are officially unemployed and receive their salaries under the table. But these official industry figures were enough to make Nollywood the country's second largest employer. In Nigeria, it costs from $25,000 to $27,000 to produce a film. Films usually complete the full cycle from script writing to final editing within a month and bring the main profit for a period of 2 to 3 weeks after release. Most films on DVD and cassette easily sell over 40,000 copies. Successful films sell hundreds of thousands of copies. Each DVD costs less than $1. Studios, both in the physical and corporate sense of the word, are unknown. There are no lots, pavilions, or trailers for the stars. Everything is filmed on the run. But despite the success of the films, the income of Nollywood actors is not that great. For the lead role, a popular actor is paid between $1,000 and $3,000 per film. For comparison, in Hollywood, one day of filming a mid-level star actor costs the studio many times more. Today, for young people, Nollywood is the only social elevator that provides money, honest work, and at the same time does not require education, which they have nowhere to get. In the country's largest city, Lagos, screen tests take place literally on every corner, and almost anyone can get the part. Locals even say that more films are filmed in Lagos than there are stars in the sky. Cinema is currently the dominant mass media on the African continent. Cinema profoundly shapes the way Africans see their continent, because only a few of them have access to real news channels. Many of their opinions about neighboring countries are gleaned from films. Cinema literally replaces the newsfeed, newspapers, television, and the internet there.
Nollywood is the voice of Africa, the answer to CNN,
says Lancelot Idowu, one of Nigeria's best-known directors. Nigerian films are so popular in neighboring countries that Zambian mothers say their children speak their native language with an accent they learned from watching Nigerian television. And when Sierra Leone's president asked Genevieve Naji, a Lagos film goddess, to join his election campaign, he drew record crowds to rallies. Nigeria's success in film production has awakened a competitive instinct in other African countries. Now, South Africa, Tanzania, and Cameroon are actively increasing their assets and are already releasing hundreds of films a year. And all this is happening before our eyes. But the Nollywood phenomenon does not cease here. Since American and especially European cinema almost never reached Nigeria, local directors had to rely on their personal sense of beauty rather than on someone else's past theoretical developments and methods. This approach, unclouded by stereotypes and, let's say, not a very demanding audience, have led to the fact that acting in Nigerian cinema is different from what we are used to.
Don't leave my wife, my soul, my sweetheart, my only woman.
The basis of acting is theatrical overacting, not the Stanislavski system, when the actor have to get used to the role and play his character as naturally as possible. In Nigeria, the more emotional you play, the better. It's almost impossible to overdo it, similar to it so that the viewer does not notice the trick. In Nigeria, it's literally the opposite. Cinema is cinema. It is bright, dramatic, literally unreal. This is a kind of fairy tale, an exaggerated story that does not pretend to be connected with reality. which makes some editing decisions, cuts, and acting seem unnatural to us. But that's how it's meant to be. Films often depict the adventures of young Nigerians arriving in big cities for the first time. It is a universal story in Africa. Also, films frequently tend to show witchcraft and the occult rituals, thanks to which someone harms or enchants someone. Manifestations of witchcraft in Nigerian films, murder or the occultism, are for us the equivalent of a Hollywood horror film, local filmmakers say. But the main theme of Nollywood is Africa's difficult path to modernity. Behind it lies a series of trials for the main character, overcoming which he is rewarded with a decent life.
We tell stories in our own way, Nigerian way,
says director Bonda Marua.
I can't tell the white man's story. I don't know what his story is all about, but I want him to see my story too.
There is another unspoken rule that is valid for any Nigerian film. All Nollywood films movies end happily. Most of the characters find their happiness, achieve their goals, and find a family. And, it seems to me, this is a very understandable and natural request from such a large African society.
You're not going to find an entrepreneur or producer trying to pull off a Tom Cruise Mission Impossible blockbuster or some Lord of the Rings style epic, even though we have stories that could actually be told on that scale. It's more about the kind of movies we can make as opposed to what we'd really like to make. There's still a journey to go in terms of figuring out how to close the gap in terms of visual effects and that kind of thing.
Canon Belarus website quotes the words of Nigerian director Daniel Ehiman.
Personally, I would like to make more folk stories, films that show our identity, who we are now, and remembering who we were. We have over 200 tribes with unique histories and origin stories. Believe me, we have stories to tell the world.